This morning, we are going to begin, though, with Bill Cosby, who is now a free man after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his aggravated indecent assault conviction.
Cosby was found guilty in 2018, one of the first high-profile cases of the Me Too movement. Yesterday, after spending nearly 3 years behind bars, the 83-year-old comedian and actor walked out of prison and went back to his Pennsylvania home. NBC News correspondent Ron Allen has been following this case from the very start. He joins us from outside Cosby's home in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. So Ron, Cosby is back home for the first time in 3 years. But how did he get there? What's behind this ruling on his conviction?
Well, through it all, Cosby has been waging a very aggressive fight for his freedom, claiming that he wasn't treated fairly during this entire process. The Supreme Court didn't focus so much on the facts of the case, the allegations that Andrea Constance made against Cosby. It focused on the fact that back in 2004, not long after this case first happened, that Cosby essentially struck a deal with a prosecutor at the time to testify in a civil proceeding in exchange for a promise that he would not be charged criminally. The prosecutor at the time, Bruce Castor, didn't feel that he had a strong enough case, so he made this agreement in an attempt, as he put it, to try and get Constance a measure of justice. So Cosby did this deposition that lasted several days. It runs thousands of pages, and he made all kinds of statements that were relatively incriminating about the Constance incident and also about his relationships with other women, where he talked about his fame, where he talked about how he even used drugs like Quaaludes, the 1970s party drug, to help him seduce young women in Hollywood. And the judges on the Supreme Court essentially found that the case never should have been brought against Cosby because he had been promised that he would not be prosecuted. Joe, Lindsay?
So, Ron, Cosby spoke with a Pennsylvania radio show about his release yesterday. What did he have to say in his own words?
Again, he maintained that he was not treated fairly. He says that this is justice. He spoke to WDAS. Here's some of what he had to say. Take a listen.
I went up the stairs. I saw Mr. This is not just a black thing. This is for all the people who have been imprisoned wrongfully, regardless of race, color, or creed. Because I met them in there. People who talked about what happened and what they did. And I know there are many liars out there, but these people can't get lawyers.
It's important to point out that he was not exonerated. His accusers and others are saying that he was freed on a technicality. He says it's fairness. Andrea Constance, the woman who made the allegations that led to the conviction some years ago, said that she was disappointed and was very worried about the chilling effect this could have on other women and other victims of sexual assault and their willingness to come forward. Again, this is one of the first big cases of the Me Too era, and its repercussions will be interesting to see how wide they spread. But again, a lot of disappointment, a lot of anger amongst more than 50 other women who had accused Cosby over the years of sexual assault. He, of course, is a disgraced figure. He has very little support in any community, and he's here with his supporters. He's said a few things, and we expect to hear more from him probably. But again, he was not exonerated, but he is a free man. And the justices also said that their ruling, he cannot be tried on these charges again.
Ron, speaking of those other accusers, we are hearing from Gloria Allred, the high-profile attorney who represents several of Cosby's other accusers. What does she want to happen next?
Well, she hopes, and other advocates hope, that other victims will still come forward and that this does not dissuade them. It's a tough thing to do. It's an extremely difficult thing to do, obviously. Remember, this case took many, many years to come to fruition. Here's some of what Ms. Allred had to say.
I do believe that this was a very important fight for justice. And even though the court did overturn the conviction, it was on technical grounds. It did not vindicate Bill Cosby's conduct, and it should not be interpreted as a statement or a finding that he did not engage in the acts of which he has been accused.
Again, she's calling it a technicality. Cosby and his supporters are calling it an issue of fairness, which is something that the justices did, in fact, say. But again, he was not exonerated. He is a free man, however. And in a very unusual ruling, the justices said that he cannot be tried on these cases again. And although there are other accusers out there, it's believed that most of these cases, if not all of them, have exceeded the statute of limitations. So it appears that Cosby's criminal problems on these matters are done.
All right, Ron Allen, starting off our coverage this morning. Ron, thanks so much.
And speaking of Cosby's accusers, several of them are speaking out about his release from prison, and some described it as a gut punch. Others said they were disgusted by the decision. NBC News senior national correspondent Kate Snow has more on their reactions.
Joe and Lindsay, more than 50 women over the years have come forward with allegations against Bill Cosby, everything from harassment to sexual assault, which he has denied. But when he was convicted, they saw it as a victory for all of them. So Wednesday's court decision reversing that conviction was stunning.
Andrea Constant reacting to the decision, calling it not only disappointing, but of concern in that it may discourage those who seek justice for sexual assault in the criminal justice system from reporting or participating in the prosecution of the assailant. Her fellow accusers distraught. Janice Baker Kinney texted, "She's angry, frustrated, sad, all the emotions, and sick to my stomach." Victoria Valentino said she didn't believe it when she first heard.
I'm outraged. I'm infuriated. How anybody could allow a little legal glitch to release a sociopath, a narcissistic, pathological, lying predator, rapist, who had no concern, no feeling, no remorse.
Cosby was never charged with rape and denied all allegations against him. Heidi Thomas was one of the 5 women who testified in support of Constant about her own experience.
I am furious with all of the enablers, over 5 decades of enablers. And today, the way I feel, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania is an enabler.
Do you still feel some vindication that the jury believed you?
No. It's that sucker punch is basically saying it doesn't matter what happened to you. It doesn't matter what happened to over 50 women who have told their stories. It's an absolute affront. It's a slap in the face. It's an insult.
Many do not see a legal path for another case, but some say they're not giving up. There is much more to say and do, Eden Turrell said, if the Me Too movement is going to mean anything at all in the future.
When I sat down with Andrea Constant in 2018 exclusively, she told me that she didn't feel like she alone took down Bill Cosby. She felt like she was part of a broader collective. And in that statement her team put out, they thanked the others who had come forward, the other accusers, and said they hope that victims will still find their voice. Back to you.
As we said at the top of the show, we're keeping our legal analysts busy this morning. Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savallo. So, Danny, this ruling is because that previous prosecutor, Bruce Castor, decided not to charge Cosby at the time, a so-called due process violation. First, here's what Cosby's attorney said about it.
It's over. As far as we understand it, the high court vacated the conviction, discharged him, and thankfully they saw it the way that we saw it, which we always believed fully that he never should have been prosecuted because there was an agreement made. He relied on that agreement, and you can't have a system where prosecutors don't hold up to their words.
So, Danny, can you help us understand this and explain how this works?
Sure. Prosecutors decide not to prosecute someone all the time. What they don't normally do is release a public press statement signed by the DA, leading everyone, including Cosby, to believe that he will never be prosecuted. And relying on that promise, according to the Supreme Court, Cosby gave up his Fifth Amendment rights and sat down for his civil deposition, which exposed him to criminal and civil liability and, in fact, led to criminal responsibility for Cosby. Even if there was not a contract, the court applied what's called promissory estoppel, the principle that even where a contract fails, if one party makes a promise to another and there is detrimental reliance on that promise, the promise should be enforced. And the court concluded the only way to enforce this promise was to vacate the conviction and take that extra step of barring prosecution.
So, Danny, of note here is the state Supreme Court said Cosby cannot be retried on the same charges. Could he face a similar charge down the line, or is it too late?
Of course, it's possible with some new victim and some new case that falls within the statute of limitations. But that would require somebody who has never come out to come out and say that, oh, I was assaulted X number of years ago. And it would have to be within, say, the 12-year statute of limitations for this particular charge. Of course, there are other statutes for other crimes in Pennsylvania. But it seems unlikely, but of course, it's theoretically possible.
All right, Danny Savalos, thanks so much, Danny. Appreciate all your expertise on this.
President Biden and the First Lady are headed to Surfside, Florida later this morning, and they're meeting with first responders and local officials at the site of the partially collapsed condo building. And the meeting comes as the body of 2 young children were found, pushing the death toll up to 18, with 145 people still unaccounted for. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber is on the ground for us now. Ellison, devastating news about those 2 children. What's the latest with the search and rescue efforts?
Yeah, Lindsay, as you said, 18 lives now confirmed to have been lost in this collapse. We have the names of 4 new additional victims. Among the 18 lives lost, there is an entire family, the Gara family, Marcus, Annalay, and their 2 daughters, Lucia and Emma, all lost their lives in the collapse. Lucia was just 10 years old. Emma, only 4. They lived on the 8th floor, 2 doors down from a couple named Nicole Langesfeld and Luis Sadovnik. They are among the 140 plus people still unaccounted for. As of this morning, as far as we're aware, the rescue efforts, the search, it continues. I spoke to a member of the Miami-Dade Urban Search and Rescue Team, also known as Florida Task Force 1, yesterday, and she said that this is challenging for rescuers, not only tactically, logistically, and physically, but also emotionally, because this is their community too. Listen here.
The guys and gals that are working on that pile, there are times that they are breaking down. They break down sometimes on the pile itself because it is hard. It is hard when you're going through that pile and you suddenly find a toy and you suddenly find a picture of a family. And all of these, it keeps reminding us that we are looking for people. We're looking for people's family members. We're looking for their loved ones.
There's a memorial not far from here. It's actually just outside of a Catholic church that, according to local reports, the Gara family attended and were heavily involved with. There are photos of people who are among the missing, unaccounted for, and now some of them among the identified victims. There are also stuffed animals, teddy bears. Some of them were placed there by rescuers who actually found them in the rubble. Lindsay?
Just 10 and 4 years old, Ellison. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And obviously the search and rescue continues. But we also heard last night that engineers from the same organization that investigated the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks are also going to look into this. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the immediate efforts of trying to save lives, if possible, and if not, recover the victims that are still underneath that rubble, there is also the efforts and the demand for accountability. At least 4 lawsuits have been filed related to this, most of them filed against the Condo Association. A grand jury is expected to look into this. And now NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, has officially launched a full technical investigation, very similar to what they did after 9/11, to try and understand how this building was constructed, modified, and also maintained. They say their mission, their investigation runs secondary to any sort of criminal or something along those lines, that type of criminal investigation. But it's something that can potentially down the road lead to changes in building code standards. Listen to some of how they described it at a press conference yesterday evening.
This will be a fact-finding, not fault-finding, technical investigation. It will take time, possibly a couple of years, but we will not stop until we have determined the likely cause of this tragedy.
We are going in with an open mind. In any building collapse, we would want to understand how the building was designed, how it was constructed, modified, and maintained.
And NIST has been on the ground for a couple days now, but they've officially launched this investigation as of yesterday evening. They say that they will not interfere with any of the ongoing search and rescue efforts. Lindsay.
All right, Ellison Barber live in Surfside, Florida. Ellison, thank you for your reporting. A massive fireworks explosion in Los Angeles has left at least 17 people injured, including 10 law enforcement officers yesterday. Everyone is expected to be okay. Los Angeles police were seizing more than 5,000 pounds of commercial-grade fireworks in South Central L.A. when it happened. They tried to dispose of just 10 pounds of small improvised explosives in an armored vehicle, but the force of the blast destroyed the entire truck. You just saw that right now on your screen, the force of that blast. This is the aftermath here on your screen. Not much of that truck left. And the explosion, obviously so big, it shattered windows, so damaging several cars and nearby homes there in the area. A 27-year-old man has been arrested so far. He's accused of importing the fireworks from out of state with plans to resell them for the July 4th weekend.
We're learning more about the deadly impact of this past week's extreme weather. In the Northwest, excessive heat killed more than 60 people in a region that rarely sees such high temperatures.
Yeah, Bill Cairns is joining us now. So, Bill, what is the weather looking like now ahead of the 4th of July weekend? Are we kind of out of the woods here?
As far as the heat wave goes, it's still hot in the Northwest, but it's not record-breaking. It's just maybe we want to call it like uncomfortable. The Northeast is over with their heat wave. And yesterday, by the way, Newark Airport hit 103 degrees. It was the hottest that Newark Airport had ever been in the month of June. So that was a record that was on the East Coast. So as far as what concerns we have right now, 35 million people are under flash flood watches. That's probably the biggest concern. We've had some overnight flash flooding around Indianapolis. There's some very heavy rain in southern portions of Ohio. And all of this wet weather is going to slide towards the mid-Atlantic. And it's going to move slowly, too. So as far as severe weather goes, yesterday we had a lot of wind damage with those thunderstorms in the Northeast. Today, a couple areas from about Washington, D.C., Baltimore, southwards, the southern portion of the Jersey Shore, Maryland, Delaware, and areas from Norfolk, Virginia Beach towards Richmond and Fredericksburg. Damaging wind once again, isolated. I don't think there's going to be a ton of it out there today. And how about this? At 5 a.m. this morning, the National Hurricane Center said, yep, another tropical system. This is Tropical Storm Elsa. This one is out in the Atlantic. It has about 2 or 3 days until it gets towards areas like the Windward Islands near Lake St. Lucia. But as we go through the holiday weekend, we have to keep an eye on this because by the time we get to Monday night and Tuesday, this should be near Florida as a tropical storm. So, guys, you know, there's no rest at all this summer. It's like heat waves, flash flooding, tropical systems. It looks like it's going to be one of those summers.
Keeping you busy for sure, Bill.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Another big story we're following this morning. NBC News has learned a New York grand jury has indicted the Trump Organization as well as its longtime CFO, Alan Weisselberg. Two sources familiar with the matter confirmed the indictments to NBC News. And new this morning, Weisselberg has surrendered to the office of the Manhattan District Attorney. That happened a little after 6 a.m. Now, the specific charges were not immediately clear, but it is expected the indictment will be unsealed this afternoon, according to a representative with the Trump team. We do know that these are state charges, not federal ones, and therefore potential tax crimes. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent for investigations, Tom Winter, who's been up late through the night reporting on all these developments. So, Tom, these indictments are 3 years in the making. What do we know about the case?
Joe, I think this is going to be specifically tied to benefits and compensation off the books that Alan Weisselberg and others may have received as a result of their work for the Trump Organization, and whether or not that was correctly accounted for. You can be bet if they're moving forward with an indictment, they're going to say that it was not correctly accounted for and properly handled. So that's where I think this is going to center around today. As you suggested, Alan Weisselberg is, in fact, at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. He turned himself in around 6:20 this morning. The Trump Organization and Alan Weisselberg will be in court sometime around 2 p.m., we're told, according to a person familiar with the matter on the Trump side of things, later today. And at that point, we'll know the specific charges that they're expected to face, Joe.
So, Tom, do prosecutors want something out of Alan Weisselberg in terms of cooperation? And if so, what are they looking for here?
I think that's exactly where they're going with this, is kind of an opening salvo in an investigation that, as you said, is over 3 years old. It's been just a little bit over 4 months months and 7 days since they've gotten Donald Trump's tax returns. And really, Alan Weisselberg, as the chief financial officer, is going to be the person who knows why the Trump organization did what it did with respect to its finances. And that's where this investigation centers around. So if you're going to get somebody who's going to eventually perhaps cooperate, testify, provide information, Alan Weisselberg is really one of the keys to that.
And Tom, important to note here, former President Trump has not been indicted, but does he face perhaps any legal or financial trouble down the road?
Well, not today, but I mean, I think long term, that's going to be the ultimate question that we're going to have to try to figure out, Joe. And it's really up to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. What documents do they have and what information can they get if it does, in fact, lead to Donald Trump?
And Tom, what other avenues are investigators looking at in terms of any other potential crimes?
You know, one thing we're not talking about today is something that Cy Vance and his attorneys said, the Manhattan District Attorney said in their court filings, which is this idea of bank fraud and potential insurance fraud crimes. They've included that in the past as something that they are looking into. They wouldn't say that if they didn't think those were avenues to pursue. So we haven't heard anything about that today. Again, just another indication why we think this investigation is going to continue far beyond today's indictments.
And we know you'll stay on it. Tom Winter, thanks so much for your reporting this morning. Appreciate it.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.